My name is Jenny Heiberger. I'm the parent of Ann Heiberger, class of 27 here at Pitzer. And I'm a member of Pitzer's Family Leadership Council. And I'm honored to introduce Marguerite Elliot from class of 71 and Emeritus Professor Daniel Segal, who came all the way from Indiana last night.
She came from Northern California.
In Northern California, traveling. Marguerite is a sculptor based in the Bay Area, and after receiving her BA from Pitzer College, she taught at the Otis College of Art and Design and the Women's Building, a center for feminist art education and practice in Los Angeles. She was a pioneer in the feminist art movement in LA during the 70s and 80s. Her public installations and performances have focused on feminist, environmental concerns, social justice, and nuclear disarmament issues. Her public sculptures are installed in sculpture parks in Denmark, Finland, France, and Ireland, as well as New York, Nevada, and California. She has been awarded artist residencies in Denmark, France, Finland, and Ireland, Nevada, New York, and Vermont. She is a recipient of a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. Among her recent publications is the book, The Women's Building and Feminist Art Education, 1973 to 1991, a pictorial her story published in conjunction with the Getty Initiative and the Otis College of Art and Design. So welcome. And Dr. Daniel Segal, Emeritus, Jean M. Pitzer, Professor of Anthropology and Emeritus Professor of History, curated the third interdisciplinary faculty-driven exhibition produced in partnership with Pitzer College Art Galleries. The exhibition, titled Remembering Hyder Esbel, celebrated the art and legacy of internationally renowned Indigenous artist Hyder Esbel, who was an artist in residence at Pitzer in 2013 when he co-curated the exhibition Cattle in Amazon with Dan Segal. Join me in welcoming them both, Marguerite and Dr. Professor Segal.
Okay, thank you all for being here today. It's lovely to share my work, my career with you, and to be in conversation with Dan Segal. So thank you so much for being here. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of my work, which kind of goes from the 70s all up to present. So yeah, and then afterwards we'll have a conversation. Yeah. So I'm a welder. I consider that kind of a feminist art practice because not many women are welders, and I love it. So, oh, hold on. Oops, wrong way. Okay, here. Okay, so after graduating from Pitzer in 1971, I headed to Los Angeles, where I was an inaugural member of the Women's Building with the Feminist Artist Studio. And right away, I did an installation and performance called From Victim to Victory. And that was based on experience, unfortunate experience with cops in that area. The Women's Building was totally new. It was radical, it was feminist, a lot of lesbians there. The cops hated us. And they came by one night, and unfortunately, Cheryl and I were there alone at night, and they proceeded to beat us up, basically. And afterwards, we felt horribly victimized. And back then, there wasn't an avenue to remedy that. So what we decided to do was a performance and installation that would kind of turn it on its head and give it some, what they call agency. How does this work? Oh, there we go. That was part of it. That performance, and we were one of the first performances at the Women's Building, and the Women's Building kind of became known for its performances after that. I did some installation work around nuclear proliferation. This is called Shovel Defense, A Grave Mistake, and it was based on this cartoon political cartoon by Paul Convent. And it was at a time when Reagan said, or one of his henchmen said, all you need to do to survive a nuclear war, if you can believe this, it's a shovel. So So you can like dig yourself a grave and protect yourself. That's great. All right, so we did this in front of City Hall and several other places around Los Angeles. And I worked with a performance group called the Sisters of Survival. And they got dressed up as nuns, these colorful habits, and did a performance from in and around the shovels. And that's when we get interviewed. And what was great about these performances is we got a lot of attention, especially the first one in City Hall, and it was broadcast on local news channels. And part of the whole thing about political art was getting coverage for that. It wasn't just about being these precious things in art galleries and being part of that elitist venue for art. It was making a statement, getting it out there, and boom, then it's gone. It's a lot harder these days to get media coverage. We got it. This was in the Village Voice, Helping Us Freeze, and a Spanish newspaper, as well as many others. So, yeah, we were quite pleased with what we got. From there, I did a piece at California Institute of Technology, which creates all these scientists that help build bombs and whatnot. So I did a performance called End the Race, where End the Race was an installation where I had a big banner hung on one of their prominent towers there. And these were like shadows that were reminiscent of what went on in Hiroshima after the bombing in Hiroshima. And the race, or end the race, so that's what you have to wear after you get covered with, whatever you get covered with after nuclear proliferation and bombings and all that fun stuff, gas mask. Then I started focusing on my neighborhood. I lived in Bowser downtown before it got gentrified. And there was a lot of homeless folks there, as there is more today. But back then, there was folks that kind of hung around where my studio was. I was like right across from the old flower mart. And there's a couple of guys that kind of got to know as they're coming and going, and I'd strike up conversations with them, became friends with them. And I ended up doing a couple of installations with them where I photographed them, did these portraits, interviewed them, so I had a sound recording of them, and cast them, I cast other people in what looked like homeless folks. It's like, because I couldn't really cast them in my studio. So when I would have their voices I'd have their voices around the fire. I did another one where they had the garbage cans, where they would pick the stuff out of the garbage cans in their shopping carts, and so that their voices were actually coming out of the refuse, which was great, And they had these lives. They had not wonderful lives, but they were well respected. I'll put it that way. They became friends, actually. So a lot of the work at the Women's Building later on, thank goodness, was archived at the Getty Museum at the Research Center there. So it took many, many years for the work that we did to get recognized as important, and now a lot of it is at the Getty. And that's my friend Marie and I, and Holden our book that is at the Getty now. Then I moved to Northern California, where I started welding. Actually, I started welding when I was in LA. A friend taught me, and I moved to Northern California. I had better access to welding materials and a place to do it. And recently I started doing work around public artwork. I had done a lot of smaller pieces for inside that dealt with environmental issues. I would seed pods and leaves and tree branches and like that. Then when I went to an artist residency in northern Finland in the Arctic Circle, I learned, this was like 6 or 7 years ago, that the Arctic was melting much, much faster than the rest of the country. And at the time, after I finished working at this artist residency, I took a solo trip up to the tippy top of Fenley, because somebody told me about all these women that had gotten burned as witches back in the 1600s, and I had to see this. Anyway, so as I was driving up north through the Arctic Circle solo, through hours and hours of like nothingness and forests and reindeer and marshes and no paper map, no nothing, no towns, no people. I was kind of nervous being solo, but I had my phone, my GPS, and I realized, I have to have my GPS. I'm totally reliant on cell phone towers. So after that, I started doing a lot of things that, to me, were symbolic of cell phone towers and the troubling interface between our environment and technology. Because now you see cell phone towers, obviously all get out, all over the place. And we have to have them. We're relying on them. So this one is in the Holden Gardens, proud to say. And I've always had a leaf, these were gold leaves hanging down. So from a leaf, so that's kind of the vulnerability and leaves and trees, but they point us back down to the earth. It's called Fire Sentinel. It has some other name to it, but that's what I remember. This is also in the Holden Gardens. And I was inspired by the horrific wildfires that we have, especially in Northern California, and have it here, and now all over the earth. So a fire is a symbol of destruction. It also can be a symbol of hope and purification. This one has a solar candle inside, so it lights up at night. So I encourage you to go take a look at it. This is a piece I did in Salem, New York. It's in the sculpture park there, but it's also now a rendition of it is now in the Holden Garden, and it's called California's Sentinel Eco Warrior. That's in the night. It's in the town. I've done a lot of artist residencies. I've learned so much at them. I love the international aspect. I've learned from everybody that come in contact with international work. Let's turn back. So this one was in Denmark at an artist residency there that I was invited to. And this is now in their sculpture park. And at the time, I was inspired by the Viking heritage, the Norse heritage. So that's a reference to the Nordic boat, the Viking boats, and on the top is the goddess of, or the chief goddess to, like there's Thor, and then there's Gaia, and she was the goddess of women and peace. At the time, when I did this, those horrible hearings to confirm Brett Kavanaugh were going on, where they were grilling the woman from Stanford, and I felt like there's no safe harbor for women. We're interrogated no matter where we are, no matter what we do. So this is in search of a safe harbor. Where have all the birds gone reflects on, 2.9 billion birds that are lost in the past 50 years. This one is currently at the Port Harbor Sculpture Park. Oops. That's me working on it, on my reducer trees, so you can kind of see the scale, and I have to get up on a ladder and do all this cool work. So that's one of the things I love about working with steel, is all the bendy stuff. You work with heat, you put things together, but also have to bend them. And this reflects on, the sculpture focuses on the 36 million trees that are lost due to climate change. Due to climate change and loss of habitat. And 1 in 6 species are threatened with extinction. So they're angry. I'm angry, they're angry. And I show it. They're very barbed and twisted and gnarled. And I gold leaf is it, I don't know, just like over there. And they have birds' nests, the golden bird's nest, and each one has a symbol of hope that, hello, bring back pearls, bring back trees, bring back birds, and this is currently installed in Santa Rosa. And I'm also working on a series called Waves of Light, which kind of emit the energy from the earth, and the new ones have references to kelp beds, which are also becoming extinct because of climate change. But they also are bright and shine, and they bend in the wind. So that's it. So thank you for being here. If you have questions, I'm going to be in conversation now with Dan.
Marguerite and I spoke last Sunday over Zoom and went on easily for an hour, but I'm going to promise that I have a couple of questions that I think hopefully will be particularly interesting, but I'm going to keep track of the clock and try to give 10-15 minutes at least at the end for your questions, so it's not just the two of us. I also want to say I came out early. I'm in residence in Bloomington for most of the year, but I came out early to look, and the sentinels are extraordinarily beautiful in Holden, and they're wonderfully installed. I assume, Chris, you had a lot to do with that, and they're really beautifully installed. And I'm also sure they look different in different lights. So the students who are here, I hope you'll walk through morning light and the bright afternoon light, and then you said in the evening there's some solar, so that'll be, so take advantage of that if you're here. The parents probably won't get as much chance to enjoy it, different lights. But they're beautiful, as well as having the political resonances, which the beauty doesn't come through on the slides as it does in person, and I was really thrilled to see them in person, not just on the slides. I want to start by going back to Marguerite's time at Pitzer. I got here in '86, so 15 years later than she graduated, but overlapped with, there were still people from when she was here who were here. And yet, one of the things that I've learned talking to Marguerite was that as best she and I can figure out, and this might seem surprising given what a stellar career she's had in art, Pitzer did not yet have an art department. Pitzer, when Marguerite was here, had almost nothing. I mean, starting a new college from scratch, you can't believe how small it is. But yet, even though Pitzer, and I think this is something that speaks to something crucial about Pitzer, even though Pitzer did not have an art department, you did have an opportunity to work with really a great and renowned artist of the second half of the 20th century. And could you talk a little about who that was? And I think, even though it wasn't Pitzer, it speaks a lot to part of what has made Pitzer as special as it is.
Yeah, one of the cool things about Pitzer is you can take classes at any of the colleges. Is that still true?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it was so important back then, and you could also eat at other places. Back then, McConnell was horrible. So I was a student.
Much better
I'm
now.
looking at I said, oh my God. I had to take a video of it. It was so amazing. But anyway, so I'd come from an impressive girls' boarding school back east. And I was just so ready to fly the coop. So ready. Get out of Pitzer, was just calling to me. It was Southern California with the Beach Boys, it was calling to me. So I was so happy to get out here. And I wasn't allowed to take art. When I was in high school, I had to take Latin and make sure my Latin grades were up to snuff. So I was just so ready to get into art. They didn't have art here, but who cares? They had Paul Soldner over at the ceramic department, ceramics at Scripps College, and he is this very famous ceramic artist. And he came at a time when ceramics was transitioning from craft to art. So there's the pottery tradition, which is beautiful, but also the art part. And he was kind of making that transition and doing raku. And he had a very dynamic sculpture, ceramic department there. So so I got into that. I absolutely love working. I love working with clay. I love the firing process. That's kind of what inspired me to get into welding because of the transformation with the heat in the kiln. And the welding and the torching, when you're welding, it's at 3,200 flame. That's like right there. With ceramics, it's in the kiln. But yeah, Paul Solom's great. The classes were great. They had graduate students there that were working side by side with. So, I mean, it was just a win-win for me.
And I do think the fact that, we didn't have an art department, but we did, because we have a consortium, and that's both not at Pitzer and very much at Pitzer, and something that we have to really cherish and keep going. The other thing, when you said that to me, I will say, I had never thought of how, on the surface, totally different, taking squishy clay and firing it, and that starting with hard metal and firing it and making squishy were, they don't, if you'd asked me, I would have said they don't have anything in common. And then hearing Marguerite talk about how she had artwork with one of the great ceramicists of really the 20th century, whose work is in lots of important museums, and you should see if you get a chance. But hearing Marguerite talk about how sort of the going from squishy through flame to solid versus going from solid to squishy and then back to solid.
I know.
That was a real insight to me.
Yeah, with the heat, because of the heat.
The heat, right. And that, I just loved that as something I learned and thought about for the first time last week. I want to ask you about the women's building. You joined it. What can you tell us about, and then you have a book about it now, but what happened to it? Can you tell us its story a little bit?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's an amazing place. I was so lucky to be there. And that was a unique opportunity for women. When I was in ceramics, after college, I spent a year working in a ceramic studio out here. And it's a very male-dominated field. And I just realized that, I was going nowhere with this. I saw a poster, maybe at one of the colleges, that said, hey, this feminist studio art program is starting up with Judy Chicago and Arlene Raven, who's an art historian, and Sheila DeBreville, who's a brilliant designer. And they're going to start this women's building and the feminist studio art shop. And so I said, yeah, that's for me, man. That's all I knew about it, just kind of like I didn't know much about Pitzer when I came out here. So I went in there, and I have to say, I had spent the summer in Colorado teaching ceramics at the Anderson Ranch, which was just starting back then. It was started by Paul Solomon, and I lived in a teepee. So I drove into LA, teepee poles on my van, my potter's wheel in the back, my dog. And that was that, I was ready to have at it. And that was a great experience. 30 women came from all over the country who were really ready for something different, and different it was, and we forged this great community and gung-ho for feminist work, because at the time it was all, the art world was all men, for sure, and abstract, minimalism and abstract, which was fine, but hey, there's other things to make art about. And we started talking about, well, hey, let's make art about women's issues. We can talk about rape, about just feminism in general. We can talk about incest. We can talk about, all different kinds of things and make art about it. And that's what we did. That was just great, groundbreaking. We had an incredible set of people that would come by there. Angela Davis.
Who I just will mention has a significant connection with Pitzer, which we can talk about. Yeah.
Oh,
you mind if I take a moment?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So when Angela Davis was effectively, and this is something to think about today when we're seeing one of the most extraordinary tramplings of academic freedom around the country for people who are speaking out for Gaza and Palestine. Students getting their rights, faculty being threatened with dismissal all over the country. Angela Davis was a clarion voice for black equality, black freedom, and Governor Ronald Reagan essentially ran her out of the University of California, and that was contested in the courts, and she eventually got reinstated. But the Claremont colleges had a Black Studies program, and the dean had the capacity to issue a contract without checking with the presidents. And he did. And he issued a contract for Angela Davis to teach at the campus while she had no other employment because Reagan had driven her out of the university. And after that contract was written, I'm sorry to take up your time, but after that contract was written, and this is something I think Pitzer should be very proud of, the other colleges of the consortium went out of their way to repudiate having her teach here. And you can read the New York Times article from that time. It was disgusting. Everything she stood for, they were against, but they consulted their lawyers and that the contract couldn't be broken. The only college that did not denounce her was the college that was most vulnerable and had the smallest endowment and was poorest. The college and some of my senior faculty who are now not with us also made sure that she could teach safely. And so of the consortium, it was really the other colleges would tell, now they're of course proud that they had Angela Davis, a famous figure, but it's easy after the fact to be proud. But Pitzer stood by her and did not make public statements about how her repulsive Marxist communist ideology had no place in America, which are the kinds of things the other college presidents said. And that's another, and then she came back and spoke here in graduation. Somebody helped me, but about 6-7 years ago. So that's you were talking about her at the women's group.
Yeah, this was like 71, 79, 73, probably 74. She was there. Lily Tomlin was there a lot. Jane Fonda, a number of poets. So a lot of people came out from New York to speak. So we were exposed to a lot of top-notch, cutting-edge feminist figures back then. It was amazing. And also that's when we learned that why there were no women artists that were in art history books. That was mind-blowing, so thank you, Arlie Gaither, for, educating us about that. So.
I really am watching this because I can see all sorts of people want to jump in. But one thing I'm going to ask Marguerite to talk about, which students and maybe parents have an interest in, how the hell do you pay the bills and feed yourself as an artist? Because we have a lot of students interested in art, and there's no formula. There are certain things you can major in, and the world is ready to pay you for them. And there's other things you major in, and the world isn't. And I think that's, rather than pretending that just magically, because she's so talented, the funding was there, and you are that talented, but still, it's not easy to pay the bills.
Even now. Really. Art is, you're supposed to do a passion, and you want to show your work because, it's good for you. There's I can't tell you how many times, sculpture parks, they say, hey, we'd love to have work out here, and $500, shipping, I have no idea how much shipping costs. So, yeah, we're still kind of doing it because it's fun or something, I don't know. But anyway, so as an artist, you have to wear many hats, which I did, and I had many different kinds of jobs, because I wanted to stay in the art world. There's other things you could go into, graphics and this and that, but I wanted to stay close to the art world, so I worked in galleries in Los Angeles for many years as an assistant. I did some curatorial work. Up in Northern California, I ran an art gallery for a while. Then I did promotional videos for artists and had a production company. And I did art tours. I took people, I rented buses, and I took people around to artist studios in Northern California. Even did a trip down here to Los Angeles during the Pacific Standard Time exhibition. So yeah, a lot of different things. And teaching, of course, the teaching.
And I think we who I don't do art, but I love art. And I think we have to think about, and students who've had me in classes have heard me talk about this. We have to think as consumers about, when you see art, if you can, support it. And all of us as citizens, right? We know that one of the reasons that in certain periods art flourishes is because we collectively support it through programs for the arts. And when the arts get defunded, when the National Endowment for the Arts get defunded, there's less and
Oh,
less.
totally. Yeah, and the 70s and 80s, it was much easier to get grants. And Los Angeles had the seeded grants, which were, a lot of artists I knew got seeded grants, which were great. So yeah, the funding has totally dried up things with Congress for doing that. But yeah, also, I adjusted my lifestyle. I wasn't expecting to buy a house in Beverly Hills or whatever. And it's fun with me, I like where I live and I like my lifestyle and that's what I do.
But it is something that is a challenge for the individuals who do it, but I think it also needs to be thought of as a social and political issue that, if we want the society to be enriched by great work like this,
Right.
We have to collectively make a commitment. And our colleges and universities have to collectively make a commitment to keep art and to keep our galleries, I would hope, very important. One of the things that meant a lot to me when we talked and in seeing the slides today is Marguerite has never shied from controversial issues. Some of those issues are issues that are still with us, the feminist issues, the safety of women in a society in which women are unsafe. The homeless issue strikes me as painfully contemporary. At the same time, there was an issue that her art dealt with that in teaching over the 38 years was present on our campus and has become almost invisible. And I felt it was so important to remind us that the activism around this issue has disappeared, but the issue hasn't disappeared. We're just as much endangered, and our species is just as much endangered by the proliferation of nuclear weapons and the use of nuclear energy. And yet, the risk to us has not diminished at all, and yet it's barely registers in terms of the issues that we have resistance. And that meant a lot to me to see that. Could you talk a little bit more about that issue and your art? And I love the focus on Caltech.
Yeah. Back then, it was like the big issue, besides nuclear proliferation, was the nuclear power plants. And I remember protesting up at like Diablo Canyon, and didn't they just recertify that or something, even though it's aging out? And Newsom said, oh yeah, it's okay for another 10 years. I mean, God forbid. But I mean, that's a disaster waiting to happen, the whole nuclear thing. So the nuclear power plants, we don't have a good alternative for it as yet to replace it. So, but I mean, also, when I work about the environmental stuff is, we're not going to be around to experience, all the stuff about nuclear stuff or homelessness when our environment collapses. And I strongly feel we're on our way. We're way on our way. We're past our way. So, I hope, these college students today will come up with some solutions to help remedy the horrible stuff that we have done in our generations.
I mean, sometimes when I see the terrific activism about climate catastrophe, even though I know that from the time the science became clear, we have yet to reduce carbon emissions. So the mainstream establishment has failed entirely to reduce emissions. The threat has increased, but it's almost as if we can only keep in mind one existential threat at a time. That we will, have all sorts. I think about, I've had a wonderful life, which has included the privilege of teaching here. But I look at my 3 granddaughters and I try to imagine what the world will be if we do not drastically reduce carbon emissions. What world will be here when they're my age? And then, I think we have to keep in mind that there's the climate catastrophe that's unfolding, and then there's behind that the threat of nuclear catastrophe.
Totally. Well, their whole military-industrial complex, which is pushing all that, the nuclear weapons and whatnot. So.
And I just love being reminded of that in the art, and I really appreciated that. And ask Marguerite to add slides of that as a way to remind all of us that that issue hasn't gone away. Marguerite, do you want to say any final word before we open it up to question and answer?
No, I don't think so. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them, and I'm just grateful. It's been nice being back on campus, kind of seeing where it all started and why Pitzer was pivotal to me at that time in my life.
Maybe I'll just say, at this moment, with the inauguration of the new president, Pitzer has taken on the theme of celebrating its radical roots. And I hope that Marguerite and her art inspires us and makes us understand that, we shouldn't just celebrate radicalism when it's gone, in the past. It was great that Pitzer had Angela Davis. It was great that, there were radical things going on. What we need is a present and a future that is as radical and worthy of its radical roots and worthy of great alumni like Margaret. We need a radical present and a radical future to have a humane future. So that, I was really pleased to have you come back and remind us of that. And it's so many inspiring issues. And I think maybe we'll turn it over to the questions and see people in the audience have questions. Lots of them. Let's start at the back. Maybe you want me to
Sure, we had to call.
Thank you for doing public art. I'm a huge believer of it. And it took many years for me to learn that my old town, Madison, Wisconsin, had a law that said that certain public buildings required X% of the cost of them to be converted to public art. But that was incredibly hard to one, learn about that there was funding for public art that then could become more politicized and radical and vocal. But then also, I have no idea if that exists out here. Like, you probably, I hope you know, like, how can we as citizens learn when there's an opportunity to talk to city councils or whomever to advocate for existing allocated funds to be used for art that can make a difference, as Professor Segal just referenced?
Good question. I think out here we had 1% for art passed a while ago, and I don't know what's happened to that. So,
that's sad that you don't know, right?
I know,
That's
exactly.
part of the hidden problem that I'm asking about, I guess, right?
I don't know, but also a lot of the public art is like, with a budget of 100,000 to 500,000 or something, which is out of my league, and it ends up being, like corporate art kind of thing in front of bank buildings. What I would call plop art almost.
But that's why we need to know how to express ourselves to change
Good
that.
point. And a lot of places, they do have like art committees or art councils. If you go on, your city art council or something, you would have a separate thing that's for the arts. And yeah, get on one of those and fight for it. Yeah.
In a world of peril, and I think we are in a moment of just extraordinary peril, and intensified peril in the last month, there are glimmers of hope, and one of them is that much too slowly, LA has been restoring public transportation, subway and metro. It's now terrible, and that's so much better than it was when I got here. We've achieved terrible in public transportation in LA. But they have had a budget for art in every of the metro stations, and there's beautiful, beautiful art. Great artist Rubin has stuff, but also one of our wonderful faculty at Pitzer, Jesse McCoy, did the artwork in the station near USC, and it's extraordinarily beautiful. She went and walked around the community and got to know people. And her art does really great work capturing people's lives in a particular community. There's a piece of her art in the lobby of Scott Hall that, if you haven't seen, is really worth looking at. And if you get to the station near USC, I think it's on the red line. Do you know, Chris, which line?
I haven't been on that line.
But go to it. It's Jessica's work. I'm sorry she's not here, but, well, she should be blushing wherever she is. It's gorgeous work, and it's also very feminist work, and in that sense, very connected to Marguerite.
Thank you.
There was a question here.
Yes, I was just very struck by, when you were involved with this women's group collective doing your work and being confronted by law enforcement, it sounds like. I mean, you weren't that much older than some of the students in this room.
Oh, totally. I was like 23,
Can you
24.
just tell us more about like the climate as a feminist?
Oh my God.
What was going on?
Yeah, Rampart Police Station. I don't know if it's still famous for its brutality.
Yes.
They would come by and hassle us to death. The fire department would come in, supposedly to, okay permits or something, and hassle us to death. how they would say disgusting things, like lunch dykes, what is this here? I mean, it was just horrifying. Yeah, it was dangerous. Yeah, it was dangerous for women, especially if you were a lesbian. They would get hassled and get hard. Yeah, it's not good. It's not good. Yeah, yes, but it was, the women's building provided an enclave and a support system, which was great. It was our sanctuary. We had a bookstore, we had a cafe, there's a couple of galleries, we had shows going on all the time and performance stuff, and then after 2 years, we had to migrate down to Spring Street, kind of start all over again at a new place. But yeah, it went on for years, and we had lots of cool people come out and talk. Yeah.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the educational mission of the women's building and the effort to address the bias in university-based art programs where faculty were mostly men?
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, we didn't deal with that. We wouldn't even talk about it. We all knew that it was biased, and in fact, you couldn't get a job, teaching art in the university. And I think there was a big show, like that first year, out of the museum. It was a retrospective or something of art that was in Los Angeles. It was supposed to be, and there was no women, none. So that's when we started having protests out there, and started like concentrating. We have to do it ourselves. And there's something, and we recorded it. One of the cool things about the women's building is there's a lot of documentation going on, both photographs and videos. And a big thing, Judy Chicago would say, if it's not recorded, nobody's going to remember. Nobody wrote about women artists back then, and if you don't write about it, you don't get it out there. So we're going off in a different direction. It was like, let's not try to fit into the gallery system. Let's do our own thing and create our own way of distributing it and being out there in the world. That gives us more freedom to do whatever we want to talk about, whether it's incest, rape, job opportunities, whatever it was. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and just in terms of like how, like who's teaching there, and I mean, I read a little bit about the formation of the women's building, but just what precipitated their starting that group? I mean, you talked about it a little bit before, but I'm just wondering if you have any additional insight.
Well, there's nothing for women artists, feminist artists out there in the world, in universities. So that's kind of what they started with Judy Chicago, and she had started a feminist program in Fresno like a year or two before, but there's no teaching opportunities for, we weren't allowed to have feminist programs. There's no such thing. And Arlene Raven was an art historian, and Julie Redfield was a graphic designer. And she had this wonderful graphic department there where she built up the machines so you could put up posters and books and stuff like that to record women's experiences. So that was kind of the thinking about it. To do something different and create the venue to do something different and get it out there in the world so you have fallen into the art, traditional art practice.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, great. I know when you were here last month, you talked a little bit about how unique it was to have your artwork in Holden Garden when you used to stay in Holden Hall when you were here. Right, Holden? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it was Holden Hall. When I first came here, it was Holden Hall, where I stayed the first 2 years, and then now it's like Holden Garden.
Yeah.
And it's Holden my sculptures. I mean, how perfect is that?
So I just being an alum from Pitzer in '71. How does it feel having your artwork back on campus?
It feels great. I mean, who knew it would never happen, but yeah, it feels great to have it in such a perfect location, and the set is so nice, and thank you so much with Chris for making it all happen, and of course it's a 2-year process to have it happen, and it's here, so yeah, I feel very proud to have it here, and grateful. That's nice, it's just really nice.
I got one more question, not about that. But your '84 piece that you mentioned, "And the Race" or "In the Race," was that did that happen during while the Olympics were in Los Angeles? Was that
For what?
with the Olympics.
The 84 piece, did that happen while the Olympics were in LA? Was that a summer thing? That you're
I have no idea. I don't remember. It wasn't raining, so I don't know. I don't remember.
Nah, I was just
Sorry.
curious.
And I don't even know how it came about. I mean, I don't know if I knew somebody at Caltech. I must have had it in there in order to get permission to do it. And I was written up in the papers, and other than that, so I don't remember what time of year.
Yeah.
Don't be shy. Other questions?
I wonder if we could talk a little bit about, oh, sorry.
Go back there and here and then.
I just wanted to say thank you for coming out and talking. It really has inspired me, specifically the way that you use different mediums. Because at times I feel like I'm constricted to only use one medium. I'm about in like perfect one. But I really appreciate that you show that it's not really, you could be interdisciplinary about how to choose what art you want to make. So I really appreciate that.
I'm sorry, I was having a hard time.
Yeah, I have an accent. I'm from Kenya. So
yeah. Because of the mask.
Oh, but I was just saying I'm very thankful for you coming.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And she particularly appreciated your use of different media.
Oh, right.
Right, that was.
I think that's a strong feminist statement because women were expected to do, like smaller things. And actually, there's this great quote from Jane Austen from Chicago that women only, because way back when women worked in the house. They had, maybe if they were lucky, to have a bedroom or someplace where they could paint, and they could only make a painting as large as would fit through the doorway. So it just, for me to make large-scale stuff and have a studio where I could do that is, it's a statement in and of itself. And working with heavy steel and power tools, and one of the things I think working in the ceramic studio here at Scripps, you're handling big lumps of clay, and the wheel is electric, so you're doing some kind of like manual labor kind of thing, and I love that kind of stuff. And also at the Women's Building, the first year, hey, do we walk into a building with studios and galleries all set up? No, there's like nothing there. I mean, some of us were appalled. We're supposed to do what? Build the walls, build the studios, put this up, but we all learned how to use power tools. We put up the sheetrock, we bought it, we sprayed, we did this, I sanded the floors, we painted the tools pink to make it more user-friendly for women, and that just has carried throughout my career. I love power tools. I don't paint in pink, but I love doing them.
Kristen,
So, what?
I just, Dan, you were talking earlier about the history of resistance and radicalism here at Pitzer, and I'm wondering if you could maybe, either of you or both of you, kind of weigh in on ways you see that the potential for that continuing, not just as people are students and kind of matriculate through the college, but also ways that people might engage in acts of resistance meaningfully in their normal life. I mean, I know there's a panel tomorrow about life after Pitzer, and a number of alums are speaking on it. And part of my interest in that is like how those core values of Pitzer are used throughout people's lives, rather than just being something you genuflect to and remember during your time here.
Well, just a little bit, and that, I feel almost like Pitzer is a self-selected group, of students who are willing to be activists and look at the world differently and to do something about it. So I think that's a draw for the students. And for me, it's just kind of inbred. It's just part of who I am, and especially when I realize the injustices towards women, which is in the art field, it hit me in the face, and you got to do something, and to push back. What do you think, Dan?
Well, I think one thing that Pitzer has had, and there's been violation of it in the last decade, but still, Pitzer has had a governance system that more fully empowers the community. And I think a college has to be run. Academic decisions have to be by the faculty. When trustees and administrators weigh in, you cannot have the highest quality education. You need to have the people. You have to have a governance system that really empowers students. This is one of the only places that also has a staff council that actually participates in governance and having staff voices. We need to do better in all of those, but I think you will find Pitzer becoming normal in the wrong ways if you diminish the robustness of the shared governance system by having power taken by the administrators. And so I think it doesn't, I think self-selection happens, but I think you have to respect democratic shared governance. And that's a very tough thing to do. You know, tomorrow, I had agreed to do this. Chris asked me, it seems like it was in a different world sometime back in April, and I have two thoughts about that. So tomorrow, I'm seeing a large group of alums, and I was thrilled after we started seeing we had the horrible violence that all of us should condemn on October 7th and mourn for every life lost, but in response, we had unleashed on the innocent civilians in Gaza a extraordinary level of violence, and our alums, Life After Pitzer, stepped up. We very quickly had, I think we're now close to 200 alums for social justice signed a brilliantly written alumni statement, and tomorrow I'll be meeting in downtown LA with those from the LA area to talk about how they can continue to push Pitzer to be on the right side of history on this issue. And I think that's an example of our alums taking their values to Life After Pitzer. And the other thing I think about here is Pitzer has had a lot of alums at this point, which wasn't true when Marguerite was here. And I know a lot of our alums. I mean, I taught over 100 students per year for 38 years. And, but two of the most successful alums that Pitzer's produced are both women artists. One we have the privilege of being with. The other we can't be with right now. Some of us visited her, and that's Anne-Marie Jassi, the great Palestinian filmmaker whose films have been shown at Cannes, who's been on the jury of Cannes. She and her sister have a community art house in occupation in Bethlehem. We had a delegation of 14 faculty and students, mostly Pitzer, but also from CMC, who toured the West Bank, to study tour of the West Bank in May. We visited with Anne-Marie in Bethlehem. We brought ceramics from our great Pitzer ceramics professor, Tim Berg. She received us, and we had hoped that we might, just as we brought you back, we'd hoped we might bring Anne-Marie Jassi back to do a retrospective of her films. That's not possible right now. She's there with her kids, and we are hearing about the bombing in Gaza, but I'm in touch with Anne-Marie every couple of days. And in the West Bank, Palestinians are living under siege. The soldiers and the settlers are stampeding through pogroms. And she worries about just stepping out of the house, or her kids worry about stepping out of the house. And I guess, I hope for a world in which, just as we've had the privilege of bringing you back, that there will be a better world where we can bring Anne-Marie Jassi back and have her here to talk to our students. Sorry to interrupt, son.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
But, just to reflect on how the student governance, I talked to some friends of mine before coming down here, especially for the VIP thing, but they were saying, hey, trying to reminisce about what Pitzer was like back then, and they were very much into, hey, Pitzer asked for student governance. They were very active, the students and the administrators and stuff, and the students had a lot of say-so, and how the college was run, and they were asked for their opinions. That was pretty cool to hear that. I wasn't involved in that kind of stuff because I'd been very involved in high school in student governing there, and I was wanted to do art. But it made me feel really good that Pitzer was so open to hearing and collaborating with students. and I hope it keeps
It-
up.
Yeah, it's definitely still that way. I mean, students,
good.
is it still that way, students? Yeah,
Good.
you're involved in.
Like everything
things,
else on its better days.
You know, and Pitzer, as Nigel Boyle will say often, you know, we're one of the only schools in the country where students actually have a say on what faculty get tenured, you know, because we have students on the FEC, on the faculty.
And the empowerment of our workers and our staff is also important for shared governance. So thank everybody, and thank Terrence for being here.